can see that I think that, you know, we've been making these wonderful, valiant efforts for centuries to create a culture, to create systems where we can have more freedom and more equality and more justice and just more sustainability. And we have great minds working on these things all the time. Why is our progress so slow? Why do we have such a difficult time actually getting there? The earth is obviously abundant. There's plenty for everyone. We can feed everyone easily. There's no reason for us to be creating massive inequity and violence. And yet, if you look deeply, we see that there's the underlying message in the food that we keep getting and keep eating and we keep propagating and we keep spreading and we keep enacting ritually, because eating food is a ritual. This is probably the most powerful ritual in any culture, is eating. It's very powerful. So the ritual going on underneath it is going totally the opposite direction towards elitism, disconnectedness, violence, domination, exploitation, and oppression. That's the fundamental thing. So this obsolete mentality is invisible. You know, Carl Jung talked about the shadow. He said, and we understand this, that it's very ironic. Like, if the shadow is what we are, but what we don't think we are. Well, no, I'm not that. And so we end up projecting that and then attacking the projection typically. And so the interesting thing is that if the shadow is relatively small, minor part of it, it's very easy to, it's easier to see than if it's a major part. And I think this is the big shadow, is our culture's ongoing brutality towards animals for food. It's something that's so vast, it's so obvious. I think if someone came from outer space, landed here on Earth, spent a little time looking around here around the United States, and then radioed back up to the mothership and said, okay, so what they're doing down here on this planet is they're eating a huge number of animals. You know, we don't think of ourselves as that's what we're doing. But believe me, living in an RV, traveling around, it becomes obvious. Most of the land is devoted to growing grain and soybeans to feed to imprisoned animals. Hospitals are springing up everywhere, more than anything. And in every single dwelling you go into, there's the flesh and secretions of animals right in there that everyone is eating and feeding to their loved ones. This is what we're doing. This defines our culture. And it's pervasive. And yet we just think I'm an architect or whatever. But we're on a deeper level, this is what's happening. And so what comes out of this then is that when we look deeply into all of the dilemmas and problems that we're having, the things that we really are talking about, you know, if you turn on the news and you talk about the problems that we're having that we can't seem to solve, the irony is every single one of those things we are doing to animals routinely for food. You know, the problems that we're having that we just can't seem to solve, we're sowing the seeds and we're reaping the effects. So in the World Peace Diet, I talk about this because I think this is something, again, that is not discussed by anyone, really. I don't see it in our culture's ongoing conversation to solve problems. Like, for example, we have an obesity epidemic. More and more people are getting fatter at younger age. And what are we doing to animals, millions of animals for food? They're given special feed and special hormones to make them very fat very quickly. Chickens now, I mean, the number of days before chickens are slaughtered keeps diminishing. It's down now to like between 35 and 40 days. After they're born, these chickens are big and fat and slaughtered. So we sow the seeds of obesity in billions of animals, and lo and behold, we reap an obesity epidemic. We reap an osteoporosis epidemic because we do the same thing, especially to female animals who are used for milk and for eggs. We sow the seeds of osteoporosis by making them overproduce milk and eggs. There's a lot of calcium in milk, there's a lot of calcium in eggshells, so these animals are just having the calcium basically ripped out of their bodies by forcing them to overproduce. And so slaughterhouse workers, for example, say that dairy cows, after they're killed, they can break their bones in their bare hands. They're so full of osteoporosis. And same thing for chickens. Their hens, very often their bones do break in the battery cages because they have to give so many eggs, much more than they normally would. And so we sow seeds of osteoporosis. and we have an osteoporosis epidemic. We sort of see many different diseases that a lot of them actually, interestingly enough, are psychological diseases. The drug companies now are making huge profits because there are over 10,000 different drugs, hormones, and other chemicals and substances that have been approved to be used on animals for food. And so you get these pharmaceutical industry, manufacturing those, and the animals are experiencing not only a lot of sickness, and in fact now that's up to 75 to 80% of all the antibiotics that are used are given to animals that are confined to keep them alive and to make them put on weight faster. And to the point where I was just reading actually the other day that doctors are saying that we're on the brink of antibiotics becoming basically the new super bacteria that are growing because of this way overuse of antibiotics. There's nothing that will stop these bacteria. Antibiotics will be no good within a few years. And these doctors are saying that means the end of Western medicine, basically, because you won't be able to do operations or anything if you don't have antibiotics. But anyway, so what I'm saying is these drug companies are making huge profits selling these drugs, and the animals are are put into a terrible psychological state, right? I mean, they're hyper confined. They're banging their heads against the bars. They're just in frustration. They're in insomnia, they're in panic, they're in depression, and then the pharmaceutical industry is making its biggest profits selling to women and men, especially women, drugs for what? For depression, anxiety, panic, insomnia, the very same things that we're sowing, we're reaping. And the same thing, sociologists say that probably the worst issue in our culture today is the breakdown of essential family structures. I find more and more this is happening. Children just don't, have families. And what do we do to billions of animals for food routinely? There's no family structures allowed in animal agriculture. We devastate their families, and so we sow the seeds of the destruction of families, and we find we're reaping that. And basically, chronic pain and terror, and we have terrorism, all these different things. So we're sowing this. What's amazing to me, in a sense, is that. We can, like myself, getting a PhD right here at Berkeley, reading literally hundreds or thousands of books and articles, trying to understand culture, and never reading in all that time, even though I read the most progressive and radical, people, anyone ever said, maybe the reason we have the problems we're having is because of our routine violence towards billions of animals for food. That was like an unthinkable thought. It still is, really. People just do not make that essential, most obvious connection. Even though the animals cannot retaliate, but our violence towards them always retaliates in really amazing, powerful ways. And so you have another situation where the basic killing of 75 million animals a day requires whole armies of our brothers and sisters to do that work. And what do they go through? That's another thing I think we have to really look at. The fact that these workers have the highest rates of worker-related injuries, of drug addiction, of suicide, of alcohol abuse, of spousal abuse and child abuse. They go home and very often they just start doing to their people and their families what they've been doing to these animals. I mean, they're just stabbing animals all day or confining them or cutting them up. And so it basically brings out the worst in people. I mean, working in slaughterhouses and factory farms, dairies, brings out the worst in people. I could talk a long time about this because I've done a lot of research. And Martin Luther King said something I think is very profound. He said, violence anywhere hurts everyone everywhere. We're all connected. How can we think that we can have these whole large pockets of our culture where we're forcing people to do atrocities all the time, that's not going to affect us? But the beauty is also that compassion and kindness anywhere blesses everyone everywhere. So the more any one of us acts in kindness and love and caring for others, the more it blesses everyone. We're all connected. The fundamental teaching in many ways of the religions also of the world is of the interconnectedness of all life, that our welfare is all tied together, and that if we really work to make a better world for others, it'll always come back and it'll be a better world for ourselves as well. So there's a whole chapter in the book that's called The Intelligence of Human Physiology, which goes into this basic question, okay, what are we physiologically designed to eat? Because this is a major question. Most people think, well, we're meant to eat meat. Again, in the short amount of time, this book is actually on an audiobook. It's 13 and a half hours long. And what very often ends up happening is I start talking too fast, trying to tell you everything I want to tell you tonight in just 1 hour. But basically in that chapter, it just goes into our dentition, our saliva, the way our jaw moves, the hardness of the teeth, the digestive system, the circulatory system, our psychology. We are clearly not designed to be eating flesh and dairy products on a lot of levels, especially the large quantities we're eating today. And the beauty is that there are no nutrients that we need to survive and thrive that we cannot get from a plant-based diet. If we're eating animal foods, the animals who are eating the nutrients in their milk, dairy products, or eggs were first in plants, so we can get them from eating plants directly. And so I think the bottom line is we've all been given a gift by the benevolent Creator of bodies that don't require any animal to suffer to feed them. But as a culture, we've taken that gift and we've thrown it back in the face of the Creator, basically, and said, well, we're going to do it anyway. We're going to kill and confine animals. And again, this violence comes back in ways that are really sobering to think about. And but the positive side is, like for myself, I've been vegan for over 30 years, and I haven't been to a doctor in 30 years. And Madeline's the same way. In fact, we don't even have to go to drugstores. It's so nice, whatever they have in there, I don't know what it is, but I kind of remember like Pepto-Bismol and Alka-Seltzer and Right Guard and Rolaids and Viagra and whatever it is. All kinds of stuff that poor people have to try to get through the day or whatever. We can really live in a much more freely, in a much more harmonious way if we act with compassion to all life. We're not going to be penalized for that. It's not this universe. I think we have this idea that it was set up by some sadistic, being that said, well, you're not going to be healthy unless you stab and kill and get really vicious and violent, And I think we have to realize that we are blessed to live in such a beautiful place, and that we can create a harmonious world once we understand food and the underlying power, the enormous power that food has, and the mentality that's required by the violence in our food is really the mentality that causes the problems.